maybe a little bit more. Yeah, that's okay.
Znači, poslije toga imamo jednu Malvaziju Degrassi, isto 2010.
Just a quick word after the first three wines, and I think this is an example of, as I say, where I've got plenty to learn, because it's clear here the Malvasija grape I'm a little bit familiar with from Italy, and I don't know whether it's exactly the same here as the Malvasija in Italy, but there seem to be similarities. I think it's clear there seem to be small differences between the three. I don't know whether that's because they're from different parts of Istria or not. There are different alcohol contents. I suppose what comes across to me is what I really like in the wines is the lightness. There's a lightness, a finesse, and obviously they are very refreshing, which is good. Not a huge amount of character, and maybe on the perfume, variations there, which I think may come down to the different areas they're from. But I do like the fact that to my mind, there is a restraint to them. And from a marketing point of view, in export markets, that's actually quite a good thing. I think we're beginning to move away from some of the really expressive, very, very strong, bold styles, and now a bit more finesse is becoming appreciated. So, to my mind, that's a good thing. The only other thing, I assume that these are probably wines that are best drunk young. It's the way they come across to me while they've still got that freshness, lightness, and that mouth-watering character.
Znači, sljedeće vino je Trapanov cuvee.
This, after the first three that I commented on were all somehow quite straightforward, light, crisp, perfumed, but how can I put it, uncomplicated. But that was part of the pleasure, very easy to drink. And when I say easy to drink, that's a compliment, okay? That's not a criticism, that is a compliment. It's very important. With the others, I'll go through them one by one and draw maybe one or two conclusions. The Malvasija from Trapan, the number 4, that was interesting because I liked the creaminess that the Chardonnay and the Cioli had given it. I thought that worked really well. It's not too oaky. I thought it was fresh. It was a bit richer than the first three, had a bit more to it, but not over the top. And I thought it worked well. I had no idea how well Malvasija blends with other grapes, and I'm still learning, but I thought that was successful. The wine 5 was fascinating. That for me is the sort of wine that is really just interesting. The sort of wine that keeps me interested in wine as a business, because it's different to most of what one normally tastes. And there you've got characters. I don't know if you're familiar with traditional dry Grave from Bordeaux, but it had characters I associated with that. It had characters I associate with slightly mature Semillon. And I liked the fact that it was oxidative without being oaky, without being too oaky. For me, it was the oxidation characters that came through rather than the oak. But still very fresh on the finish. I think that style of wine is an acquired taste, but I also think that in export markets, that sort of wine is important because it shows that Croatia can make highly distinctive wines and is bold enough to make wines that aren't sort of normal light dry whites. I ought to just explain one thing. In the market I know best is the United Kingdom. And in the United Kingdom, increasingly, the wine market is polarized. You have the wines that are sold primarily through supermarkets and discounters, which are decent, everyday drinking. An awful lot of them taste the same, red, white, and rosé. Whichever country they come from, whichever grape they come from, they seem to taste much the same. A little bit of residual sugar, a little bit of CO2, added acidity if necessary, and often sold on price and on promotion. And that's one side of the market. Now, I don't know Croatia well, but I suspect that's not the market that you're aiming at, because that market is driven mainly by price. And from what I know of Croatia and the economies of scale, most of the wines sold through supermarkets as well are produced by big companies who have big economies of scale. Many of you, I suspect, work on a smaller scale, and you would be more interested in the other side of the market in the UK, which is more character, terroir-driven wines with a sense of place, a sense of origin, and just more interesting. Wines that will appeal to the wine lover, someone who's involved in wine. But obviously that is a very small part of the market. It's only maybe 10% of the market, possibly less than that, 5%. But the UK is a big market, so 5% of a big market is still quite a lot of wine. But it seems to me that that's the area of the market you would be aiming at, and that's why wines like that really are interesting, I think do have a place, because they have a story to tell if you want. The wine 6, I'm going to talk about wine 6 and 7 together, because as was explained to me, one was aged in French oak and the other was aged in acacia. Look, maybe it's because acacia is new to me, whereas French oak is not new to me. I found the French oak aged wine a little predictable, a bit international in style, with less of a sense of where it comes from. Nicely done, fresh, but a little less character. The acacia for me was just more interesting. For me it had more intriguing flavours. It stimulated more. It stimulated my palate more and maybe my mind as well. So of the two, I found the acacia more interesting. But that could also be me, because acacia is new to me, it could be me wanting to like acacia, the acacia-aged wine. But if I wanted to like it, then other people, other wine-interested people in export markets might also be inclined to want to like it too. So I think it's a valid point. The number 8 was the Roxanich. This is I drank the Chardonnay at lunchtime, the 2007 Chardonnay, comparable to this at lunchtime, and it was quite fantastic with the fish that I ate. Again, for me, this is the sort of wine that I hope finds its way onto export markets, because it shows again it's got a story, and it shows a boldness in winemaking. I haven't tasted anything quite like it before. It was the only thing I can compare it to, and it was similar to my experience with the Chardonnay at lunchtime, was an Amontillado sherry, but without the alcohol. Amontillado sherries have very complex flavours, but they are fortified. So it would typically be 17 or 18%. Obviously, this isn't fortified, but this had some of the complexity of aroma and flavour that you might find in an Amontillado sherry. For me, very exciting and still fresh. It may be because the Chardonnay I was drinking at lunchtime, whereas this I'm drinking now, I was slightly more conscious of the alcohol on this than I was on the Chardonnay. But that could have been the different situations. The number 9, to my mind, this was the one I mentioned earlier when tasting the first 3, that I really liked the lightness, the elegance. And to my mind, there is a freshness and a finesse with Malvazija. Number 9, I guess, for me, that was another one where the alcohol, it just came across as a bit heavier in style. Okay? Not bad wine in any way at all, but a bit heavier. I think where you've got more alcohol like that, people expect more aroma and depth of flavour to go with it than that seemed to have for me. Number 10, I really liked that. That was, number 10 was, it was an interesting mix of grapes, but for me, very, very harmonious. A very harmonious whole, very complete wine, and I thought the oak was really well judged. There, but very much in the background. And it was almost as if the oak helped shape the wine and helped give it roundness. I thought that was extremely successful. Number 11, again, I thought, forgive me calling them by numbers, but it's easier than me trying to say the names. I apologize, because I know that sounds a bit patronizing, but it keeps it flowing for me. Number 11, again, very complete, very harmonious. The one difference here was I felt this was a, how can I put it, a slightly more, as soon as I smelt it, it smelt to me like other wines I could taste. It came across as more international in style. Now that's not necessarily a bad thing. If wines have an if wines are successful internationally, it's because there's a market for wines with this character. But I suppose compared to some of the other wines I've tasted here, it was a bit less distinctive in terms of its origin. But very nicely done in terms of overall balance. And again, I liked the freshness, the lightness to it. I thought that worked well. And I think that's it for the Malvazija-based wines. Look, I'm saying what I think. I hope I'm not upsetting people. Any particular questions on Malvazija? I am not a winemaker. I understand winemaking, but I'm not a winemaker myself. What I know most about are wine styles, I suppose. What's sold around the world, what sort of styles different countries are producing. That's where my knowledge lies. Any particular questions on that grape before we move on? Or on what I've said there? If not, there will be a chance to talk later. It's fine.